Hey Younger Youth, it's Jess here again. Thank you so much for joining us for the final week of our series, Selah Sessions. Now I want to talk to you a little bit today about the question of when. So we've looked at why it's important to take time to pause and to lift up God as something of value. We've talked a bit about how, and now it's time to talk a bit about the question of when. Now, I was talking to my friend Yaz about this. Now, some of you might know Yaz. She's one of the youth pastors here. And we were talking and saying that God's timing is perfect, but it doesn't look the same for all of us. So what this basically means is that some of you might be completely ready. You've been practicing pausing and you've been practicing waiting already. But for some of you, you might feel that you need to go through the kind of the why and the how and get a bit more comfortable before you're ready to put this into practice. And no one of those is right. No one of those is better than the other because God's timing is perfect and unique for all of us. Now, Yaz used this really good analogy about a marathon. She said that if she wanted to run a marathon, what she wouldn't do is put her trainers on, go out the door and start running. But what she would do is take time to practice and rehearse and get her body prepared, and she'd get into a routine, and then she would do it slowly. And this is kind of what faith is about as well, because we know that faith is a journey, but faith is a journey and it's a long one. So we want to put practices in, and we want to put these kind of these things into place that can help us to sustain us on the journey and not just kind of run full speed and then completely burn out and have to stop and get bored of the process. So when I was preparing this, I felt that I was writing some things down, and I felt that I wanted to go into a bit about like God's timing, because it can be really tricky to accept God's timing sometimes, and to see that God's timing is perfect and that God's timing is great and that he can use all things that happen for good. He can turn all situations for good. And I think especially in this time of lockdown, it can be really hard to believe that, and to believe that God can use this for good and that actually his timing is still good and perfect. Because actually sometimes things might not go in the way that we're expecting, and when you're feeling anxious about a situation, you want to be in control, because, well, for me at least, I feel that I have the power to change a situation. But actually it's God that changes situations. It's God that's in control. Now, in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, it's part of your Younger Youth Journal, so you can turn to it if you like. It talks about God's timing, and it talks about that God has got a plan for everything. Now, you can read it in your own time, but I just want to point us to a couple of verses that really speak to me. So in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1, it says, "There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven." And I love that, because it's saying that actually there is a time for everything and that God has timed things out so perfectly. And then at the end of our verses that we're looking at today, in Ecclesiastes 3 chapter 11, it says, "He's made everything beautiful in its time. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end." In other words, we're not always, and more likely than not, we're never going to understand God's timing. But that is part of the beautiful mystery of this faith. And actually, I think we need to stop trying to understand God's will and just come to a place of accepting and saying, "God, you are in control. I accept your will." Because it says here that we're not always going to understand it. And that's okay, because that's what faith is about. It's putting our trust in something that we don't quite understand. So coming back to the when that we were exploring, when to practice being still and when to practice pausing with God. This is going to be different for everybody, mainly because God's relationship with everyone is unique and it is different. But for me, I like to take time to pause and to declare God's value every day. Now, some days it is just for a couple of seconds, and it's me just saying, "Okay, God, I'm putting you back in the driving seat of my life. Whatever's happened today, things that I'm happy with, things that I'm not so happy with, situations that I wish I could change, I'm just going to declare that you're in control." Now, other days, me pausing is a more intentional act. Sometimes I will actively take time to listen and be still and see what God has to say. And I might even write down some things that I'm really thankful for, write down some things that make God really valuable to me. But what I want you to know, young youth, is it isn't always going to be the same for everyone. And actually the when is going to be different for all of you. Now, I also like to take time to pause and to thank God whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed or anxious. Now, for me, that is that time, those moments that I feel overwhelmed has increased since lockdown, because it is a bit of an overwhelming time. Things are changing constantly. There aren't kind of boundaries in place. It's a bit scary, and that's okay. Now, I think when you are feeling slightly overwhelmed, maybe it's with schoolwork that you've got to complete online, or maybe you're feeling a bit overwhelmed about, can you go out in lockdown? Can you not go out? I think it's really easy to put ourselves in the driving seats and to kind of believe that we have the power to change things and we have the power to kind of transform situations. And yes, we can do things to change things, but ultimately God is in control. And ultimately, if you take time to pause daily and you take time to praise him and put him back in the driving seat of your life, you're giving over that power and you're saying, here are my anxieties, here are my worries, here are my fears, and I give you the power to change things, because ultimately your timing is perfect. So young youth, I just want you to know that I hope over the past couple of weeks that we've kind of explored a bit about the why, the how, the when, and I hope that we've kind of inspired you to put this into practice when you feel ready. So young youth, I encourage you to take time to go through your young youth journal, and there's a song that we've encouraged you to listen to. Go onto YouTube, Spotify, you can probably find it anywhere on the internet. It's called Seasons by Hillsong Worship, and I really encourage you to listen to that song. Maybe look at the lyrics, because it's a really powerful song that says that all seasons have a time, all seasons have a purpose, all seasons have a reason. And I want you just to take time, and maybe if you're feeling comfortable today, to practice Selah and to practice pausing and lifting God up as something of value. So young youth, I hope you have a lovely, lovely week, and I hope that you can take time to pause and take time to reflect about your unique relationship that you have with God. And why don't you join us next week for a brand new series?